Hey folks, Future Tom here, and welcome to the Dice Tower. Before we get started, I wanted to talk to you all about last week's episode. Now, last week's episode, we had a segment in it from Mike Rudman called Bonus Action. That segment has since been removed from the show, so don't bother going back and trying to find it. But I got a lot of emails about it, and so we pulled the segment, and I want to talk about the segment a little bit more. But before we do, Mike wanted to say something, so I'm going to let him do that here.
Hello, Dice Tower listeners. My name's Mike Rudman, and I host a segment on the Dice Tower podcast called Bonus Action. And I wanted to take a quick minute to apologize for the segment that aired on the show last week. It was overly suggestive, and it was inappropriate for the show and for the network. And it also reinforced some potentially hurtful gender stereotypes. And I should have known better. Tom has always done a great job of, he's built and sustained a network of family-friendly content that no matter who you are or where you're from or who you're listening with, you know, you can feel comfortable and you can feel safe knowing that you're getting just really, really top-notch content. And he trusts that his contributors know that and will abide by that. And I violated that trust. So I apologize, Tom, and I apologize to everyone associated with the Dice Tower and to the listeners. Please don't let this tarnish your opinion of the show or your desire to support it in the future. But I just wanted to apologize and let you know that it certainly won't happen again. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Folks, I want to make it clear that I did not make Mike do that apology, but we did talk about it, and he decided to do that of his own accord. But it doesn't matter, because ultimately the Dice Tower is my show, and anything that's on the show, I'm approving, so it is my fault. And some people say, Tom, how could you air such a thing? Well, we have a lot of different contributors and segments for the Dice Tower, and sometimes we run them through, and I look at them, and I say, okay, let's post it, and I don't listen to all of them. And so I just trust the contributors. I've listened to their stuff before, and I say, okay, we'll stick that here in the show. That's not an excuse, really. I'm trying to explain how I got in the show, because I probably would have pulled it had I heard it, although it took me a bit to listen to the segment to understand what was being said in it. But the fact is, again, folks, the fault is mine. All right, I'm not blaming Eric. I'm not blaming anyone else. It is my fault, and I work really hard to make the Dice Tower a family-friendly show. And here I really flubbed it all up. And I'm really, really sorry, and I want to apologize to everybody. Now, I know whenever we do something like this, because I've already seen a bit of this in the forum threads, that some people are going to say there was nothing to apologize for. You don't need to worry about it. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. But folks, we're not really doing that. I understand everybody has different senses of humor, and I understand that everybody's going to get upset. But the fact is that we are really, really striving hard to make the Dice Tower a place that is friendly to everybody, and especially to women. Because that for such a long time in gaming they weren't, and segments like that are a step backwards. You can say, well, that humor and people who don't enjoy it are humorous, but you know what? The fact is that we need to be above that. We need to be better than that. And so I take Mike's word for it. Mike is a great guy and made a mistake, and he owned up for it, and I am owning up for the mistake that we've made on the Dice Tower too. I really would ask those of you who were upset with Mike to forgive him. He asked for forgiveness. He apologized. And I also ask that you forgive us. This is something that, as far as I can help it, will not happen again. Well, let's go on to the rest of the show. I hope you enjoy this one. Here's Eric.
Hosting for the Dice Tower is generously provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff in stock at CoolStuffInc.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 498.
Game with us!
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Scott gives the history of pandemic. Luke bluffs his way through another segment. Max talks therapy. Brian enters the Coliseum. And Mark reviews one of Jeff's designs. Plus, we have a magnetic tale of horror. We answer some questions from the mailbag, and we hear from the contributors on what game they'd like to play with me and Tom. I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the Joseph Pulitzer of board gaming, Tom Vassell.
I know who he is. I don't know what that means.
I may have been watching a lot of Newsies lately.
Yeah, you went to see it live, didn't you?
I did. Well, they did like a theatrical presentation of the Broadway musical, which was awesome. It was really good. I had not seen the Broadway show. I was a fan of the movie. Hadn't seen the Broadway show and thought I never would. And they presented this. I guess they recorded the show in Los Angeles or something with the original cast and showed it in movie theaters, and it was amazing. Really good. The kids loved it, and now I've got the soundtrack running through my head all the time. Pulitzer and Hearst, they think we're nothing. Are we nothing? Yeah, anyway. So you're the Joseph Pulitzer of board gaming. You know, a pioneer in journalism.
Yay. Well,
and the
folks,
Newsies are going to fight you.
We have recorded episode 500 by this point.
Yes, and we had a great time at the Gamma Trade Show. So much fun that we haven't been able to process it all yet, so we're going to wait a week to talk about it.
That's right. That's okay. So that will be our next episode. We'll be talking about those, and episode 500 will come up after that, which is essentially a big clip show. But hopefully
it's turning out
to
it. Be. But it's sifting through all of the submissions for that has been fascinating because I thought that there'd be a few, maybe a dozen very popular clips that people would mention as their favorite, but it's been spread out a lot. And throughout the entire history of the show, it's been really neat to relive that, and hopefully we'll be able to cover as much of that history as we can in 500.
Wait till we get to episode 1000.
Oh my goodness, I'm going to need a whole month to get ready for that. Maybe you'll just rerun episode 500.
That's right.
We'll just do clips of 500 okay. Remember when we remembered that episode? Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen these shows before where they do like a clip episode, and then they do another clip episode, and the second clip episode, you're like, yeah, okay. You already used the good stuff in the first one.
It's true, yeah.
Well, folks, this is a gaming podcast about board games, card games, miniatures games you can play on top of a table.
And then there's that one you play underneath the table.
Sure. Well, we're going to start off with a game that we both played. And that is Cole Baron, the card game. Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry. It's Cole Baron, the Great Card Game.
Yes.
That's a dumb name.
What's the full-size board game? It's
just Cole Baron.
Is it the Great Game?
Maybe it is. I don't know.
I think it's relating to the big box game.
Actually, it's kind of a fascinating thing because Cole Baron they're both published by Eggert Spiel, but in America, Cole Baron is published by R&R Games. Cole Baron, the Great Card Game, is published by Stronghold.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of an unusual thing. I have not played the board game. Have you?
I have not, so I can't really compare them.
Oh, great. So there's no comparison here, folks. Just talking about this game. Now, this is a game in which you are trying to get coal into trains and then have those trains go to different destinations and get points that way. You do this by placing workers. There's decks of cards all over the table, and you're going to want to take the top card of a deck, whether it's an engine of a train, a car of a train, some coal that goes in one of those cars, a destination, like a recipe
contract.
In a sense, a contract to get points for these trains, a share, which can give you more points for a contract, technology is not the best word, but like cards that give you bonus actions later on, and then cards that just give you victory points for collecting different various things for no reason, and then cards that let you load your coal into your trains and then deliver it. To activate these cards or to take the card off the top of a pile, you put a worker there. You have to put one worker out first. And then if someone else wants to go to the same spot, they have to put a worker number 2 there or 2 number 1 workers. You always have to place a worker one more than the person before you, which means as you're taking turns placing workers out. If I'm left with a worker 4 in my hand, and there's no 3s currently visible, I can't play that 4.
Right.
So you have to be very cautious in that regard. It's actually a little cutthroat sometimes, because you will sometimes say, "Oh, wait, he hasn't played his 4 yet. Well, I have my 4. I'm going to place it on top of this 3. That way he can't play that 4." I mean, you don't normally do stuff like that, but I certainly think about it. If I have 2 different choices to make, I'm like, okay, well, wait, what choice might someone else take? I'll do that one first. I found it to be pretty tight, that worker placement thing, didn't you? Yeah,
oh yeah. And you don't want to leave yourself, like you said, you don't want to leave yourself with just a high-numbered card that you can't play, because if it gets to your turn and you can't place, you pass and you're out for the round.
The rest of the game itself is pretty simple. It's, put the trains here, get the coal, put the coal, load the train, send them off. There's a lot of different ways to get points. There's a lot of good options. There's there's even a spot you can go to where you can draw the top 4 cards from any pile and take one of them.
Right.
It's just that one already starts with 1 worker on it, so you have to start with 2 on that one. But that one's so tempting and so useful, you will see people do it anyway.
It was a very popular spot in the games I played.
The nice thing about Coal Baron, the Great Card Game, is that it is a fairly short game for how heavy it feels. I feel like there's a lot of game there for like the 40 minutes it is, maybe an hour if you're playing with 4 players. But
yeah, I felt it was at least an hour with 3 or 4 players. I think it's not quick, but it certainly moves along at a good pace.
Slower, I think, than average.
It's true.
I liked it a lot, actually. Like I said, I never played the board game, but I thought this was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a little generic, the theming. It's do this, get this, and this. Yeah. But I like that. I like, I don't know what to do here. Oh, I'll go to this spot and take the victory point card because I can get some victory points that way. I'll do some short trains and ship the coal that way. The only thing I'll say about this game, even though I was threatened in a text to not say this legally, but there's different symbols on the different coal cars, and I feel pretty confident one of them's a dice tower.
It does seem that way, doesn't it?
I took a picture of it, sent it to Bonacor, and he's like, well, talk to Eggertspiel, not me. I said, we're suing. But every time I see it, I can't help it. It looks like the dice tower.
Right.
But
it's a look. It's like a castle of some sort, yeah.
But it really does look like it's our logo.
A little bit.
Anyway, so what was your final impressions?
I was really taken with this as well. It's a good time. It's tricky. I mean, I don't think it's quite as simple as you were making it out to be, because in order to deliver coal, to send a train on its way, you need an engine, you need tender cars, you need to put coal in those cars, you need to have an order that needs that amount of coal, and then you need to take the action that ships the coal, which may be more difficult to do based on how many people have shipped that turn. You can also, if you get the same color, there's like 4 different colors of trains, and if you get multiple trains, multiple engines of the same color, you can use one action to ship them all. So the temptation is to get, a bunch of green engines and fill 3 orders at once because you've got 3 bays on your board and be as efficient as possible. But sometimes making that happen can slow you down so that other people who are just shipping as the opportunity arises can pass you. So it's a tricky decision to make. I loved that. Do I wait to be more efficient? Do I spend to be able to do the thing I really want to do? Or do I grab that really inexpensive, bonus card or innovation card that's going to help me out later in a way that I'm not sure is going to work, but taking that opportunity now versus pushing to do the, single-minded goal that you may have. There's a lot in here, and I also appreciate the organizer inside the box. This one has probably one of the best organizers that seems useful for a base game like this. It's got like a cardboard with slots in it so that all of the different stacks of cards get organized. You don't need baggies, a ton of little bags for this. It's all right there in the box, which is it's refreshing. I really liked it.
Not only that, though, I'm glad Eric brought that up because I agree. When I opened up, I was like, wow, I really like this insert. Not only is it a cardboard insert, but it's a solid one. Usually they move all over the place and whatever. This is a good insert. Although I still disagree with Eric. I'm not saying that the game is simple. I'm saying it offers a lot of choices. I'm saying you don't sit there and go, how do I turn this into that? It's not hard to figure out
True.
what to do.
Your goal is clear. It's just how are you going to do it?
Now, last week, we had a question from a listener about King of Tokyo. And so I thought I'd talk about the expansion for King of Tokyo, the first monster pack, Cthulhu.
Ah.
Now, all the monsters in King of Tokyo have been like rip-offs of bigger monsters.
Okay.
Like, instead of having King Kong, they have the King.
The King, yep.
Instead of Godzilla, they had Gigasaur, etc., etc. Well, this one is Cthulhu. He's an actual monster. So you can buy this, and it works with both King of Tokyo and King of New York, and comes with a set of power cards to use with the expansions for both of those.
Nice.
Right, that is pretty nice. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I'm glad that they have these coming out. Sure, it's kind of like a money grab to some degree, because they're going to make a series of these. They've already announced the next one's going to be King Kong.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm really pumped about. But this adds some more to the game than just that. Cthulhu comes with a bunch of cultist tokens. Now, these cultist tokens can be used in King of New York, where they're buildings or cultists. You fight the cultist, or you smash the buildings that turn into cultists, or like the cultist churches or temples and things like that. But you can play with these cultists no matter what. You can play with them even if you're not playing with Cthulhu. You just put a pile of them on a table, and anytime someone rolls 4 of the same thing, they can take one of these tokens. And these tokens can be discarded at any point to heal 1 health, get 1 energy, or get 1 more reroll. That's a very simple thing that works. It also makes for some fun jokes like, oh, I'm feeling hungry, oh, I'm going to die, but, oh, here's the cultists worshiping, Mecha Bunny, Cyber Bunnies. I will eat them. Thank you for your sacrifice. So, you laugh about that, but that stuff goes on, right? It's
right.
Just really funny. And it's also a useful thing. It's like, ooh, I got 4 of the same thing. Oh, 4 ones. Ooh, but at least I got a cultist. That type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nice addition. And then some of Cthulhu's power cards have to deal with cultists too. Like he might be able to steal cultists from somebody else or whatever. He also has madness tokens. He can give you madness when he hits you. And if you have like 2 madness tokens on your turn, you have to roll 2 dice and keep them. You don't get to re-roll them at all. And you can heal madness with hearts.
Okay.
So I'm actually really pumped about this monster pack. I'm excited to see what they do in the future. It had more in it than I thought it would. That's Cthulhu monster pack for King of Tokyo.
Cool. I got to play Jeju Island. This is from Grail Games. Very distinctive art style here. You're visiting this Korean island, and you're trying to collect various trinkets, basically. And you've got 6 spots around the island, and stacks of tokens that go in each spot, and orders, basically, some cards around the side of the board that you'll earn points if you get a particular collection of these tokens. Makes sense? The way you get them is a Mancala mechanism. You have 2 or 3, based on the number of players, tokens, discs, that appear around the outside. And at the beginning, they're sort of spread around in an initial setup. And on your turn, you will pick up 1 whole stack of these discs that includes one of your colors. And you'll walk them around, dropping 1 disc off on each location. So now you've got a new disc that's on top of each stack, basically. And then everybody that has a disc on top of the stack gets a token from that particular pile. There's also a little bonus figure that if you are on top of that pile, you get to take an additional token from somewhere on the board, moving the bonus guy to the pile that you took. You either get to move a stack or collect one of the orders. Turn in your tokens and earn one of the point-scoring cards. Some of the cards actually earn you permanent bonuses, too. They might, now they have a particular symbol that you can use for future orders for the rest of the game. It's usually worth fewer points, but it will help you sort of build an engine as you go. And so you'll be earning tokens on other people's turns, assuming they don't cover you up, but that's part of the game, is covering up the people who have been earning more tokens, and the guy that you think is in the lead, make sure I cover up their guys around the outside of the board and hopefully get more of my discs on the top of piles. Good time. It's straightforward, it's simple. My son enjoyed it, and certainly one that I could play with the wider family. Again, like I said, the art design is fun. I liked it. I was a fan of Jeju Island. I think I'm going to keep this around for the kids to play more.
Yeah, it's fun. It's very light, though.
Yeah.
But it's light kind of in a good way. So, yeah. And also, I think Jeju Island's a cool place in general, so.
Yeah. I wondered if you had been there.
I actually haven't. But let's go to Kingsport Card Game.
Okay.
Now, Eric, have you played Kingsport?
I have.
The board game?
I believe I have.
It's like Kingsburg.
Right. No, I've played Kingsburg, but not Kingsport.
All right. Well, Kingsport's very similar to Kingsburg, but it has a Cthulhu theme on it and a few other things. Kingsport, the card game, is a game in which you are an evil cultist or whatever. You're trying to invoke the most elder gods. Honestly, I think invoking one of them would be enough, but for, whatever. So you put out all these piles of elder gods on the table, and on your turn, you roll a die. And that die is going to show either evil, madness, or destruction. No, evil, destruction, or death. Sorry. Those are the three symbols. One of the symbols is on a die 3 times, one's on a die 2 times, and one's on the die only 1 time. You then look at what you rolled, and you can take a god that has that cost on it. You can invoke, so there's one god that costs 1 evil, one that's 1 death, one that's 1 destruction, and then there's one that's 1 of anything. Once you take those gods on future turns, you roll your die. You can also play a god that might let you roll another die, or let you roll 2 more dice, or let you roll a die that's always destruction, things like that. Sometimes when you play these cards, they will cost you sanity points, and you don't want your sanity to go down, because if you lose too much sanity, you will have to discard gods from your hand, and they're worth victory points at the end of the game. Also, these investigators, Arkham Horror investigators will show up, and not Arkham Horror, Arkham investigators show up, and you have to fight them off at different rounds in the game with the cards you've collected. Once someone has defeated Azaoth, or after 8 rounds have gone by, whoever has the most points worth of gods that they invoked wins the game. So the game is a game in which you roll dice to get cards that let you roll more dice to get cards, things like that. This game has been done before. I would say the most recent version would be The Favor of the Pharaoh from Bezier Games. Have you played that one?
I have not played Favor of the Pharaoh.
Have you played To Court the King, which
I have.
The Pharaoh was based on?
Yes.
Okay. So it's the same type of thing. However, this game has a big flaw for me. When you roll that initial die, if I roll death, I have literally I have a choice between 2 gods. I can take the god that's 1 death, or I can take the one that's 1 of everything. I mean, that's just 1 of anything. And that 1 of anything doesn't give me another god. I mean, it doesn't give me another die. It just lets you not get some insanity later on. So you're better off taking the god that's a death god. The problem is that was my choice for turn 1. So turn 2, I roll the die, I get death, and then I played my new god card that gives me another death. So I have 2 death. There's 1 god that costs 2 death. So as time goes by, you're like, oh, what did I roll? I rolled 3 destruction and 2 death. Oh, there's the god I'm going to buy. I really was kind of surprised at that. I was like, my choice is literally on the dice. I mean, you got some choices, I guess, like, this turn I'm not going to play this card because it will cost me a sanity. But I was just disappointed. I felt very constrained by the design of the game. I want some tough choices to make, like, ooh, should I take that card or this card? Here, I was just like, I'm going to take whatever I get. Like in To Court the King or Favor of the Pharaoh, you're rolling dice, and then sometimes you have to re-roll. You got re-roll tokens and things, and you're like, I want to get a straight, so I'm going to re-roll these 2 dice. You don't even get a re-roll in this game. You just get stuck with what you rolled. So, didn't really like Kingsport the card game.
Okay. Got to play Lookout's small card game called Oh My Goods, which is an interesting name. But this is a resource management, sort of a civ building game that all revolves around this deck of cards. You have buildings. Most of the cards represent buildings that you are trying to build that could produce various resources, but in order to build them, you're going to need money, and you earn money by producing resources. And there's this sort of push or luck aspect that a number of cards are going to be brought out at the beginning of a round until two of a symbol, like a little sunrise symbol, show up. So you see, this is like this is the flop. These are the possible resources that you will be able to use this round. And there's going to be another row of resources that show up after you decide what you're going to do, but you don't get to see those now. So you have to decide, where am I going to put my worker, hoping that I earn enough resources to produce this round. And you can either say, I think I'm going to get all the resources I need, or I think I'm going to get all but one resource that I need. And then the remaining row, or another row of cards, is brought out until you get two of those suns again. And hopefully you got the resources you need to produce on that card, that building that you chose, which means you take some face-down cards and put them on top. And now those are a particular good that are worth a certain amount of money. And then you build better buildings that can produce better resources, but also might need more resources to be brought out into the center. You can also play cards from your hand to sort of make up the difference. But you have to make this decision when you see half the cards going, I think I can go for my really expensive resources, but if you fail, you're not going to produce anything, which might mean you don't have enough money to build the building you were planning to buy. And you have to sort of keep that economy running and keep some small value goods in your sieve so that you can pay small amounts if you need to, make change if you need to. It was tricky, and one that stuck with me after I failed miserably. I didn't do very well. There are also some extra workers, some extra assistants you can get if you've built a good array of buildings. If you've got like a red and a gray and two whites, then you can claim this assistant who can now produce more resources for you. I never even got to that point. This is one that I want another shot at, but I did enjoy it for a small box card game. There was a lot in here, and I was pretty happy with Oh My Goods. I want another shot.
Eric, I might have missed this at the beginning. Did you play with the new 2.0 rules?
Oh, I don't know. What's the difference?
I don't actually know. I just know that my review was pretty negative because I said the same things you kind of did there, where there's all these really cool things that you can do, but you never get there. This game, I felt broken. You just build a bunch of small stuff and the game ends. And so people are like, oh, well, they made 2.0 rules and that fixes all your problems and you should try those, and I've already gotten rid of the game.
Well, I'm considering tracking one down, so I'll have to, I was taught the game. I did not learn from the rules. I don't know whether this was a 1.0 or 2.0 rule set.
Well, try it with the 2.0 rules. I know they're online at Board Game Geek.
I mean, I was intrigued enough to track it down, and it's inexpensive enough that I'm, next time I order from Cool Stuff, I may, add it to get the free shipping.
The designer of the game is Pfister, I believe, right? So
I think so.
Right. So he hasn't done many bad games. So I really feel like.
I mean, even if I was playing the 1.0 rules, I was interested enough to play more. So I think I liked it more than you did.
I didn't dislike the game. I thought the game was fine. I just felt like once I was like, oh, you can just build all these small buildings, and what's the point of all these bigger buildings? What's the point of all this? You're just kind of, it's almost luck who gets the smaller buildings.
Right, but because the game ends after a certain number of small buildings, but this might suffer from the same issues that Race or Roll for the Galaxy has, that if you build a bunch of those little buildings and other people are building the more powerful, more lucrative buildings, you might not win even though you triggered the end of the game.
Yeah, no, this game does not have that balancing, because if you do a bunch of these small buildings, the bigger buildings don't give that many more points. But again, the 2.0 might fix it all up for me. So
interesting. Who knows? Okay. I want to hear about your next game. I am psyched about this.
I was just going to say, I bet Eric is pumped about this next game, Mole Rats in Space.
You betcha. This is Matt Leacock. This is a kids' cooperative game. It's Mole Rats.
Well, I don't care about that part, but it's really a kids' game, though. We're talking like a very, very light game. It's from Peaceable Kingdom. They make a lot of light cooperative games. In fact, some of their co-op games that have passed, I've been like, pass.
Okay.
This one is, I think Matt Leacock played Chutes and Ladders. And he was like, how can I make this better? So in this game, players are playing 4 mole rats, and you are trying to pick up 4 very important things to fix your ship, like duct tape and things like that. And so you need to get these 4 mole rats, pick up the 4 different pieces of equipment, and get to an escape pod. Also, there are snakes. Snakes are evil. You do not want to have a snake cross you, or you cross a snake, or a snake land on you, because then you get bit. And then if you get bit twice, everyone loses. So that's bad. Also, snakes are moving around the board. You do not want a snake to get into your escape pod, because if they do, then you lose. And also, there's a couple chutes that will drop you down to different level to level. There's ladders that go up levels. There's chutes that go down levels. Okay. But there are a couple chutes that kind of go off the board. So if you fall through one of those, you're dead and the game's over.
Whoa.
Well, just don't go in them. So what you do in your turn is you get a card, and you must play that card. So you play the card, and it will have usually 1 or 2 things on it, and it will say move your mole rat 2 spaces, or move any mole rat 2 spaces, or move the red snakes 3 spaces, or add another red snake to the board, or whatever. And so if I can move my guy 2 spaces, I usually have 2 directions I can move in. So I'm like, oh, if I move 2 spaces that way, I will fall down the chute off the board and lose. If I move 2 spaces this way, I will go up a ladder. Pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of game that it is, though. You have the choices to make, but you're working together like, move the snakes that way. If we get those snakes and we can make that snake fall out the chute, he's out of the game. So there's some optional, there's some choices that you have to make, but they're not tough choices. It's a good cooperative game for little kids. However, it's not easy. It's pretty tough for little kids. And you have to play pretty well. And then there's even a little pack of cards that if you win the game 3 times, it's like, open this pack of cards because we're going to make it harder. Yeah. I liked it, though. I thought it was good. In fact, I was just, the Dice Tower is getting ready to move to our new location. So I'm moving my game collection to the new location, but keeping my kids' games at home. And my kids were watching me do it, and they're like, wait, where's Mole Rats in Space? I was like, I was getting rid of it. They're like, no! So I may end up keeping that one.
Okay. Awesome.
That's Mole Rats in Space from Peaceable Kingdom.
Well, let's talk about a different co-op game. I alluded to this game a few weeks ago when we were talking about component level or component quality thresholds at which we would refuse to play a game. And I mentioned a game that came where the box was not made out of a cardboard box, but it was like folded cardstock that was riveted, and actively it was so rigid and machine folded that it resisted you removing the components from the box. That game is naturally disastrous. And that's not the review, that's the name of the game.
I was going to say, when you name your game, folks, please don't give us reviewers low-hanging fruit.
I know,
please.
It really is. It is, and the problem is, I wanted to play it and see if the gameplay was going to overcome the component issues. This is a post-Kickstarter game, self-published. The art is, not great. The component quality, not great. Printing sort of rubbing off on each other, and just not fantastic. But maybe the game is good. No. This is a co-op game. You are aliens. You've crash-landed on Earth. The map is made up of 9 tiles that are randomly assorted on the board. The object is that you are supposed to get 4 communications tiles, which are also randomly sorted out amongst a whole bunch of other equipment tiles and nasty event tiles that show up on the board, and they're randomly determined. You roll dice to figure out where they're going to go. And you have to find the 4 that are communications tiles and take those to the 4 corners of the board, and that summons your mothership, and you leave. The problem is that every turn you roll a die, and that triggers one of the locations on the board, like an earthquake, or a flood, or a mad scientist gets to move toward you, or a tornado draws people from all over the board onto that one tile. Also, there are bad guys like that mad scientist and a secret agent and a sniper that are trying to shoot you or capture you or mutate you. Like if the mad scientist catches you and you're KO'd, if you're unconscious, you're instantly mutated and now you fight for the bad guys. And even if the rest of the team wins, they still let the Earth explode. Oh yeah, the Earth is going to explode.
That seems reasonable.
I guess. But so then you're spending actions and running around trying to pick up these tokens and fight with the bad guys. And this is where it starts to fall apart because you need, it's random to begin with the setup, and you're rolling the dice a whole lot to trigger these events and to lay out things to begin with. And there's one secret agent that's trying to collect the tokens from you. Like, if he collects too many of the tokens, you're going to lose because he's gotten too much of your technology, and so, you lose. You can spend actions to heal the world, make it a better place. But it doesn't matter where you are. So you could be on the other side of the map, and you can heal an earthquake tile or a flood tile from way over there. Or you can revive your fallen comrade. You can heal them through the power of your mind from way on the other side of the board. And they can stand up and now do stuff. But you can't move around more than 2 spaces at once. And that just... The whole thing just felt way too random. I was not engaged. The bad guys move way too often, and I think that the designers went, oh no, I guess you can get really hosed if, the bad guys surround you and you're stuck there. So we'll allow you to heal people from across the board, or we'll let you heal the world, heal the earthquake tokens from way across the board. It all just fell apart, and I wasn't engaged with the theme, and usually I'm much more forgiving with theme. But this theme actually fought against my understanding of the game, and it just didn't overcome the component issues. I'm sorry. Naturally, Disastrous is just that. It's not worth your time.
You took the fruit.
I had to. It's right there.
All right, well, let's talk about some bluffing.
The home of smart people, insightful board gaming commentary, and Luke Hector.
Hey folks, welcome to episode 11 of The Starting Tile, and I'm tackling a rather tricky topic today, and on the subject of bluffing. Bluffing games are one that I find usually quite difficult to teach new players. Now, that's not to say that bluffing is a tricky mechanic to get to grips with. I mean, you basically just lie. But the intricacies of why you are bluffing and what you're trying to bluff about can sometimes throw off a lot of new gamers. It's easy to say, oh yeah, you can say either the truth about this card or lie about it. But sometimes new players find it tricky to ascertain why they're doing it. And so I'm going to give you 2 gateway games here for teaching the art of bluffing and lying. First up is a staple in my filler game collection, and that is called Cockroach Poker. You might also find it called Kakerlaken Poker, which I believe is the German translation for it. This is such a simple yet fun bluffing filler game. Essentially, you have different types of vermin, from stink bugs to cockroaches to spiders if you get a certain version. And the idea is that you don't have a winner of this game. It is just simply do not lose. So right there, you've already got a benefit for the fact that the person doesn't have to feel bad about necessarily not winning the game, as long as they're not a loser, obviously. Now, what you do is that you take one of your vermin cards and pass it to another player. That player then makes a claim about the card they just passed, whether it's a cockroach or a fly. And the other player they pass it to has 3 choices. They can either look at the card and pass on and make their own claim about it, or they can dispute or challenge the player by stating whether he was telling the truth or lying. And that's basically it. Whoever loses the challenge gets to keep the card and has to play another one from their hand. If a player ever gets 4 of the same type in front of them or runs out of cards in their hands, they lose, game ends, start over. Very quick, but plays great with a high number of players. Usually 4 to 6 is probably the optimal number, and it's just a great laugh. Now, once you've got the art of bluffing nailed with a simple filler game, you might want to move on to something a little bit more involved, but still gateway level for most people, and I'm going to pick the Dice Tower Essentials Sheriff of Nottingham. No, this is not just simply asking for a check in the mail. I do believe that this is gateway game level. For starters, you've got 2 sets of rules. You can either play with the advanced rules, which give you a new set of cards called Royal Goods that influence the game, or you can just leave them out and play the simple version, and that is perfect gateway game level. With Sheriff of Nottingham, you are merchants trying to get the most gold. And you do this by sneaking your goods past the sheriff, and you take it in turns to be the sheriff. Now, you take a selection of cards from your hand, which will consist of things like apples, cheese, bread, chickens, or it might contain contraband like crossbows and silk and pepper and etc. Not quite sure why pepper is illegal in this game, but who knows. And the idea is that you put them in this little pouch and give it to the sheriff and say a particular claim about it. So this is 3 cheeses, this is 2 bread, this is 5 chickens. And the sheriff has to deduce who's actually telling the truth and who's trying to pull a fast one. And you roleplay this to your heart's content, and you make bribes, and you get compensated if he's wasting your time and you are telling the truth. But if you're able to sneak that last bit of contraband, you get to raise your gold value of your goods considerably. But it's just so much fun to find a group that is willing to roleplay this to the heart's content. And at the end of the day, you're just passing cards and lying. Or you can tell the truth, it's up to you, but again, it's that element of bluffing in a game that isn't that complex. And then once you're done with the basic version, you just throw in the royal goods. Easy enough to teach once you know the basic game, but one that I think anybody who wants to teach bluffing should give a look. That's it for episode 11. I hope you enjoy these 2 games. So whether you are bluffing or lying to each other, just remember, at the end of the day, it's only a game. Take care.
And now, another tale of board gaming horror. Gather round, children. At the last Jack Vassal Memorial Fund auction on Board Game Geek, 6 Meeples-shaped magnets caught my eye. They'd be perfect for our fridge, I thought, where they'd not only become handy attaching postcards and grocery lists, but also entertain my son of 2.5 years, who likes to play with the generic magnets we have there. So I bid for the magnets, drove the price up, and finally got them for $40. Well invested money, since I'd get long-lasting magnets and support the fund. 2 weeks later, 6 shiny, colorful Meeple magnets arrived. I was happy, showed them to my son, attached them to the fridge, and was surprised the next day when all but one of them were gone. I immediately suspected my son and asked him where he'd put them. "There," he said, and pointed to our kitchenette. "I don't see them," I said. "There are no magnets down there." But he insisted. So I handed him the last remaining magnet. "Show me where you put them." He took the magnet, walked over to the kitchenette, and shoved the magnet through a tiny crack I had never seen before. "There!" he said proudly. And thus the last of my 6 Meeple magnets disappeared, never to see the light of day again.
I think it's a great story.
I especially like how he's like, "Now show me where you put them. Here, I'm going to hand the last one to you right now." And he's like, it's like sticking the peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the VCR.
Well, yeah, but he probably didn't expect that they were in a crack, right? He's like, "Oh, yeah, I'll see him put them in this drawer over here."
Mm-hmm. I love it.
Oh, well, kids, what are you going to do?
Kids, that's why we can't have nice things.
Why can't they be like we were, perfect in every way?
What's the matter with kids today?
All right, well, let's learn. Are you ready to learn?
I'm ready to learn.
All right, we're going to learn about pandemic and about raising kids.
And therapy.
Every game has a story, and this is one of them. Presenting Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
This time I want to talk about a game that asks, can you save humanity? The cooperative game Pandemic. As a child, games were Matt Leacock's favorite birthday gifts, but he often found playing them a disappointment. So he turned the board over and created a new game on the back. In 2000, Leacock used his game crafting experience to create an original racing game, Lunatic's Loot. He printed 200 copies of the game and traveled to the Spiel game show in Essen, Germany. While attending, Leacock met American game designer Alan Moon, who invited him to his Gathering of Friends event. There, Leacock played Reiner Knizia's Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation. Leacock recalls, "I was really taken with how much drama and how engaging a cooperative game could be." As a user experience designer at Yahoo, Leacock spent his evenings and weekends working on his prototype. The news of the day was filled with stories about the bird flu and SARS epidemics. He called his prototype Global Outbreak. Leacock admits that the game was difficult to play. For example, it had a single deck for player and infection cards, but 2 different discard piles. Mechanically, this idea makes sense, but it turned out to be a disaster as players grew confused over which card was to be discarded where. During playtesting, Leacock found himself constantly advising the players where to put the cards. One friend noticed this and told him to shut up, sit in the corner, and just watch. Leacock says this was the best advice he ever received. In Pandemic, players are a team of specialists who work together to research and prevent outbreaks of diseases from erupting around the globe. Ironically, Pandemic's theme almost didn't sell the game. Publishers told Leacock that it was just too off-putting. But Pandemic was released in 2008 by Z-Man Games. It features cover art by Chris Quilliams and was an immediate hit. The game has been nominated for over 30 awards, winning several Golden Geeks and the Australia Awards in 2008. Pandemic was also nominated for the Spiel des Jahres that very same year. Hot on the heels of the original, an expansion called Pandemic on the Brink was released in 2009, which introduced a bioterrorist role which pits one player against the others. In 2013, the Pandemic in the Lab expansion offered 4 new roles and a new lab board mechanism. An electronic version of Pandemic was released for iOS and Android devices in 2013, which also saw the re-release of the core game, which featured updated art, rules, and gameplay. The game also included 2 new roles, the Contingency Planner and Quarantine Specialist. In 2015, the State of Emergency expansion added new play variants and included the extremely challenging Superbug play variant. Leacock also designed a dice version of the game, called Pandemic the Cure, and designer Kerry Grayson created a card game version called Pandemic Contagion. In 2016, the Pandemic brand expanded into other genres with the release of the historically themed Pandemic Iberia and the horror-themed Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. In 2015, Leacock teamed up with veteran game designer Rob Davio to create the most epic Pandemic game of all, Pandemic Legacy Season 1. In the game, characters develop over time, new rules are introduced during gameplay, and the state of the world changes irrevocably. Leacock explained, "We named it Season 1 because it has a story arc, which is akin to watching a season of your favorite HBO show." The game was a huge success. It was nominated for a Spiel des Jahres in 2016, and it hit the #1 spot on BoardGameGeek.com, upsetting longtime position holder Twilight Struggle. Pandemic Legacy Season 2 is expected soon. So if you're new to the hobby, Pandemic is a great game to start with. The cooperative gameplay is very different than that found in traditional games like Monopoly and Life, and its gameplay is deep but without being complicated. It is definitely a modern classic.
Until next time, this has been Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
Hey kids, what's it time for?
Bringing up the Meeples!
With Dr. Max Davey.
Hello, and welcome to Bringing Up the Meeples with me, Max Davey. Today, I'm just going to play out a conversation I had with Jeremy Ferguson, a therapist who lives in Oklahoma. He very kindly agreed to talk to me about some of his work with therapy and board games. And I started by asking Jeremy what kind of therapy he does.
My education background's in family therapy, but I work with students in foster care or students who are referred to me through certain schools in the area. I got kids ranging from 6 years old to 17. There's a lot of impulse control problems. And then a lot of times kids just dealing with anger or other emotional outbursts. Yeah. And then with my foster care students, it's more of adjustment. How do we deal with, not being at home right now while they're, in the system, or we're going through adoption. So how do we deal with that transition well? Deal with those stressors. If that makes sense. That's a very broad overview.
Where do board games fit into this that you do?
Well, I have I have two uses for board games. The first one is especially with students that I have a hard time connecting with. I'll may break out a 2-player game. or something like that so we can have some form of interaction. Especially, I work with mostly boys, young boys. And what I've noticed with working with boys is that when it comes to talking about feelings, that if they have something that they can do with their hands and engage something, it kind of helps them be able to triangulate their stress, that anxiety, on something that they find more entertaining. Or
do you do it in a group setting as well with more than
that's probably my main use for board games, because my background in therapy is more systemic. We had a really interesting session this last summer. We were playing Catan. It was the first game I brought to them. I was like, hey, it's an adjustment group. Let's try something new, because I was kind of felt like I was swimming in circles, and it gets really tiring. And when I'm tired, they're tired, and it doesn't seem to work well. Which, so I brought Catan out. I was like, okay, so let's talk about this. What, if you could you play this game by yourself? I said no. I said, how come? Well, you can't really trade with people with just yourself. And then one person says, well, I don't think I would have personally the resources to be able to do what I wanted to do without help from somebody else.
And
then we talked, so we were able to make connections like, okay, so how in our life, in our situation we're dealing with now, how are you able to, how do you apply that to your life? And he said, well, I think it just comes down to, I don't have the resources by myself.
Yes.
That I need. And then we just broke out into this, okay, so how do we do that here? And then from that point forward, it for me, like, I get jazzed about that, because
completely.
Yeah. So we had a connection with something that was really cool.
And that's a moment of kind of revelation, isn't it? I can't do this on my own. I need to connect.
Right.
And that's what it's all about. That's amazing. And that's where I'm going to leave the conversation. I'm going to post a full version up on the forums. You can access it there. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about how board games can actually be used in practice in therapy. This is Max Davey with Bringing Up the Meeples.
Mr. Vassal. Tom, can you comment on the latest Essen releases?
Where do you keep all your ties?
If I threw water at you during a game, would you yell at me? And now the Dice Tower will authoritatively, definitely, possibly, maybe, answer your questions.
Tom, which way to the bathroom?
Steve has a question about balance in Eldritch Horror. If he uses, for example, an Elder God from the base game that has its certain abilities, but then he uses investigators or cards from an expansion, or from many, many various expansions, that have perhaps better or more interesting abilities, is the game still balanced? I assume this is considered by the designers, but I can't help thinking, should each big expansion only really be played with the Elder God and investigators that come in that box? Or could it be that there's so much randomness in this type of game that it doesn't bear thinking about? Also, if I wanted to play Eldritch Horror in a campaign style, thus keeping acquired items and spells, assuming we survived, would this massively unbalance the game in the investigator's favor? Or again, is the randomness in the game still enough to destroy me?
I
haven't played Eldritch Horror, but I imagine that, they sort of base the expansion packs as a theme that is probably intended to be played within that sandbox, but I'm sure they know you're going to try and mix it with everything else, too.
You can play the investigators in any box. Who cares? You don't need to play the ones that came with that guide. You can play with any investigators from any box. That's not a problem at all. I'm thinking more about this play in a campaign style. Keeping the items and spells. I think you would do really well next game. To keep your stuff seems pretty good. Unless you also kept your hit points and sanity.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone's tried it out there.
I know, my experience with Mice and Mystics was I was always feeling upset that I couldn't keep everything I had earned. I worked so hard to get this awesome sword and this cool shield and this nice helmet. But I can only keep one of them from adventure to adventure? And I found that frustrating, but if you were allowed to keep everything, the game would get progressively easier and easier, unless they've specifically designed the game to get much harder because they assume you've picked up stuff along the way.
You're going to really not like Seafall.
Really? They make you start over and start over?
Yeah.
Benny says he hears that Terra Mystica is getting rethemed with a space theme.
What?
That is correct. That is happening.
Ooh.
I don't know if it's going to be a straight reprint of Terra Mystica, but it's the same system, I think. Why are designers not doing this more often? And then he's talking about a Concordia, when he likes the way Concordia looks, but it just looks boring. And he says every year tons of games get released, most of them not worth it. Why don't they move into reskins of already existing good games? Take Concordia and take it to a space or into a fantasy underground realm, or even an underused theme like Bugs or something. Like Merms meet Concordia. Is it they don't see the money in it, or is designing a new game more fun or challenging? Or are they always on the lookout for that one game that turns into an evergreen? Yes, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. I remember that you might say, well, they should make more of this theme that interests me. And I say that a lot, right? Because I'm pretty loud about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not always the best case. As crazy as it is, there's a lot of people who like these themes that you consider boring. I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. That we, Benny, you and I consider boring.
Okay.
I don't want to throw him out there by himself. I'm with you. However, I don't get that upset about it because I know people like it. And generic fantasy and space. Did you listen to our last episode? There's a lot of space games.
Yes.
Okay. We're not hurting for games in space. And generic fantasy is really starting to irritate me because it's so boring. It's like, I got an idea. I have an elf archer. What?
Oh boy.
Is there a dwarf axeman too? Did you bring an orc berserker? Get out of my face.
You know, I'm sort of tangenting here, but I just did a book about a video game plotline tester, and the whole concept is that everyone who's playing this big MMORPG just plays the standard tropes, and, 4 different races and 4 different classes, and that's it. And so all these other things that the designers put in the game, no one's using, and so they're paying people to play as like a goblin herbalist and play the game that way just to prove it can be done. Just in relation to what you were saying. Anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's fun. I remember when Ultima Online first came out, and you could, you would learn something, and you get to be a grand master at it eventually. Mm-hmm. You get a certain percentage, you get up to 100%. So you could be a grand master at sword fighting, well, of course, or a grand master at, even chopping down trees.
Mm-hmm.
Yay. So they have all these skills, and I was like, ooh, begging is a skill.
Nice.
I shall be a grandmaster beggar. And I did.
Congratulations.
And then I would role play it up. Like, I am a beggar. People come by and be like, please, sir, I need some coins for my family. And people would be like, shut up, noob. And that's actually a really kind way of what they actually said. And it was hard, right? I was like, is this what being a beggar really feels like? And then I woke up and realized that their life's much worse than that. But I wanted to run that idea, and I want to do something different, but it's not always easy to be different.
Right. Back to what Benny's saying.
Back to the question.
I think that, if publishers were to do this more often, I mean, think what happens when a retheme of a game that's already out shows up. And unless they've made some significant upgrades in components or rules, it often gets written off as oh, well, we've already seen that game. I think, at least in my mind, if there hasn't been mechanical changes to the game, I simply say, oh, that game exists already. I'm not going to even focus on it. And I think that's what keeps, it probably won't make as much money as the original version of the design.
Yeah. Yeah.
Theo was listening to a recent Biography of a Board Game segment from Scott Rogers about Jenga, and it reminded him of a horror role-playing game called Dread that uses a Jenga tower to resolve any actions. If you want to do something difficult, you have to remove and place a Jenga piece, and if you knock over the tower, you fall and die. It got me wondering, what are your favorite examples of games within games? I'm thinking of that. What was the Via Appia, the game that had sort of the rock pushing, the coin push element? The game was really about other things, but in order to acquire resources, you had to push rocks over a ledge in order to acquire them.
I'm going to go with Carnival Zombie. Because you had to drop the zombies onto a board and not have them fall off. There's like a little dexterity game that was in the middle of this big game where you're like, we're fighting all zombies. Hang on, I need to drop some on this cardboard thing.
Yeah, sometimes they seem like real non sequiturs.
Yeah, I mean, the Jenga, using the Jenga thing in Dread does seem like it makes sense. It works really well. Mm-hmm. That's not a game in a game, though. See, Jenga's a mechanism, really.
Right.
The whole game is that one mechanism. So you're just sticking that mechanism into the bigger game.
Right. How about the GIF series? There's a game within a game.
No, that's not true.
It literally is.
No one has ever done that.
I know someone who's done it.
Never been did.
I know who someone.
Is that someone like a friend of your uncle's cousin?
No.
Who told you and whispered in a dark alley?
It's Joe Gola. We're good friends. He knows me.
He has done it?
He has played with the potentials. For those of you who don't know, the GIP series of games you can play if you get the crazy expansion packs and you own all of the games. You can, by capturing the potentials, these pieces, you then have to go play a side game of one of the other games in the GIP series. And the winner of that game gets some sort of bonus in the primary game. So if you're really doing this for real, you have to set up all the games around the room and play like the main game and then do offshoot games and then go back to the main game. And I mean, that is literally a game within a game. Several.
Insanity.
I don't know.
Insanity.
I've never seen it done. I've just heard tales.
Our last question is for Eric from Dave. He says, "Hey, Eric, love your videos and podcasts.
Thanks.
Was just wondering why the general slam against Euro games. I play these about 75% of the time. Different paths of victory and never enough time to do what you want to. I just love it." I'll answer the question.
Yeah, this isn't me. I mean, there's... The Euro games tend to have drier themes. Yes, he's talking to both of us.
Or he's talking to me and Sam.
I think
maybe.
sometimes there is a sense that all of us here at the Dice Tower hate themes that are traditionally associated with Euro games. That's not the case.
No, garbage.
I think there is, if a theme is exceedingly dry, it will turn people off. But I tend to emphasize mechanics over theme, so I'm perfectly happy to play a drier theme if the mechanical challenge is robust. How's that?
Yes, and also there's some really great games that, like Terraforming Mars is definitely a Euro game, and that's one of our favorite games from recent time. Yokohama is a really strong recent Euro game. Feast for Odin, Great Western Trail.
Yeah. I think it's
I'm just
Burnout.
not going to give a pass. I'm not going to give a pass to a game, though, that's just a bunch of boring collection of mechanisms. But at the same time, I'm not giving a pass to a generic fantasy dungeon crawl either. I know that it seems like we don't like Euro games sometimes, but look at my ratings, look at my reviews. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of Euro games that I enjoy a lot.
Right. Well, I think it's fatigue. You know, in the early Euro days, 10, 15 years ago, just having an interesting, different theme was enough. There weren't many trading in the Mediterranean games. There weren't many that had these tight Euro mechanisms. And now that there are so many great examples of these mechanisms, you need something to stand out. You can't just have a bunch of nobles in medieval or Renaissance Europe that are collecting points by being the best traders. You need something more than that because there are so many examples of that theme. And I think that's what really gets your goat sometimes, Tom. You've seen this stuff before. And unless this really stands out, why did you choose that theme? What do you have to say about that theme that's more interesting than the dozens of other games that have done the same thing? It's the same thing with zombie games. Why is your zombie game better than the horde of zombie games that are already out there.
You're so funny.
I know.
All right, well, let's get to Cult of the Old, even though this game was just reprinted like a couple weeks ago.
I know, the Cult of the Old is becoming circular.
And then we'll do Cult of the New with Mark Zelinski.
Welcome to Cult of the Old, where I discuss games we may have forgotten about, or games that failed miserably, but still had some good mechanics in them.
He's Brian Counter, and everything he does is counterproductive.
This week, I wanted to talk about Coliseum. Came out in 2007, designed by Wolfgang Kramer and Markus Lübke, rated rank 7.2 and 343 on Board Game Geek. Like the previously covered Age of Empires 3, I'm covering this one because it's 10 years old, it's one of my favorite games, and for the benefit of those who are newer to the hobby who may not have heard of it yet, this certainly hasn't been passed over. Coliseum is not what I initially expected, a game like Spartacus where you hack and slash each other and vie for power. This is more of a game about bringing people to your shows in a Coliseum. You may have to acquire gladiators for a certain show, or you might acquire something like columns for the backdrop. In uber-abstract fashion, the game is played like this. Through an auction system, players acquire various goods to put into their shows. Once you meet the minimum prerequisites, you can put on a show and attract X number of spectators. You can be a little short here or there and that penalizes you, but generally speaking, you get a certain number of spectators for a certain show. The game is played in a number of rounds, and so on the earlier rounds, you're likely to put on shows that require less goods. As the game progresses, you're getting more income as you go, and you can do things like expand your Coliseum to support more spectators. You can sell season tickets and a bunch of other stuff you can do. Interestingly, the winner of the game is not a cumulative scoring thing. It's whoever has the highest number of spectators for any given event throughout the entire game, which is interesting and good. At this point, it might sound like a simple set collection / auction thing, but there's more. You see, there's an actual board, and your Coliseum has a space on that board, and there's a movement track with a roll and move mechanic.
Surprise!
Really? But it's fun. You're getting people of political import, maybe even the emperor, to move around the board, manipulating that movement through various mechanisms. And if you get them to land where your Coliseum is, they see your show and add bonuses to your spectators and other things. That's actually quite a fun thing in this game, as others are also trying to get the self-important to land on their Coliseums. And there's also silly fun variety of different shows, like gladiator shows, or just stuff that could be the equivalent of a modern play. That's fun too. Note that this game just got reprinted via Kickstarter, and as I'm a very ordinary guy, I didn't get an advance copy, so I haven't had time to look at the version that just arrived as of yesterday, before this taping, but I look forward to getting into it for anyone who couldn't get their hands on an earlier copy of the game. So that's available. So if any of that sparks your interest, consider Coliseum.
Here he comes, here's Mark Zelinski, he's got his own theme song.
Mark Zelinski, everyone! Hey everyone, it's Mark Zelinski, and I wanted to talk to you about a game called The Fog of War, a Jeff Engelstein game, and this is produced by our friends over at Stronghold Games. And now, this is a World War II grand strategy game, and before you go ahead and hit fast forward or fall asleep on me here, this is actually a really good game. And I really wish that you would take a chance to take a look at it. It's what I consider Axis and Allies or Risk, a grown-up version of those two games, though. The game is chock full of components, but the main thing is the map with the 28 provinces in it, and of course all of the Axis and Ally cards that are in there. Now, the Axis are going to be Italy and Germany and everything all rolled into one, and the Allies are Russia, Britain, America, all rolled into one as well. And there are some neutral countries that are also represented on the map, and of course you get the usual pile of tokens. The game is broken up into 5 years. Each year ends when both players have exhausted their hands and draw decks. And of course, each year is broken up into a series of turns, and the basic turn is going to be turning your operation wheel, which we'll talk about in a minute, taking actions, as many as you can with the cards that you have available, conduct any intel at the cost of intel tokens, and then of course draw back the 3 cards and then pass to your opponent. The real charm of Fog of War is the operations wheel. As I mentioned before, Axis and Allies, Risk, you have a bunch of armies on the board, you see how many you have, you see how many your opponent has, and then you just go ahead and push it forward and roll some dice. That is not how it works in Fog of War. Fog of War, if you're going to launch an operation, you need to take a location card of where the operation is going to be launched, and then you seed that along with the army units that you're going to commit from your hand, and you're going to put that into the operations wheel. Now, you cannot attack on your first turn. You have to let your operation kind of cook a little bit here on the operations wheel. As I mentioned before, at the beginning of your turn, you turn the operation wheel. So when you put in your alpha operation, again, you cannot launch that this turn. When you turn it, then you get the opportunity to launch it with a modifier for the attacker. The next 2 turns, you can launch it with no modifiers, and then finally you get to launch it with benefit to the defender. And then the final thing is you have to disband it because that operation has just been sitting around too long. Some of the actions you can take on your turn are adding cards or units to defend your provinces. You can launch the operations from the launch wheel. You can disband an operation. You can add cards to an operation, create a new operation. And then you can add cards into quagmires, which, are ongoing fights and things like that. And then you can also conduct intel at the cost of 2 intel tokens during that action phase. So there's a lot of different things you can do on your turn, and that's what makes it fun and exciting. And you really feel in this game that fog of war. Now, of course, the big question is, how do you win? The Axis wins if they can accumulate 70 or more total victory points by the end of the game, or the Allies win if they control both Berlin and the Ruhr at the same time. I really encourage you to check this game out. It's a lot of fun. The Fog of War.
It's time for the Dice Tower's Question of the Week, sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., in which our team of gaming experts answers one of your questions, thus increasing the odds that someone will get it right. This week's question: if you could play any game with Tom or Eric, what would it be?
Hey everyone, it's Mark Zelinski, and the game I want to play with Tom Vassell more than any other is Advanced Squad Leader. Okay, Tom, I'll let you play the starter kit with me. But we've been talking about it on the air here for 10 plus years, and I would love to finally get that game in. And with Eric, without a doubt, Pokemon. Pokemon's a big part of our households, and I would love to sit down with Eric and play it. And, I might actually like to slide in a game of euchre with Eric as well.
Hey, Sean from the Game Pit here. And as for Tom and the game I'd like to play with him, well, I've never actually played Cosmic Encounter. I know, cue the eye rolls, etc. And I think the best way to play this game would be to dive in at the deep end with somebody who knows and loves the game as Tom does. So that would be my choice for Tom. Now, Eric, I've had the pleasure of meeting Eric a couple of times, and he's just one of the nicest people you can meet. I'd love to see the nasty side of Eric, so I want to play a nasty game with him. And I think my choice would be Spartacus, a game of blood and treachery, because that is just hilariously nasty. So they're my choices.
This is Brian from Cult the Old. While I've played games with Tom and Eric and had a blast, what I'd really like to play here is, and I'm not kidding, a Dice Tower Network version of Flip the Table's Heartthrob. Yes, really. Put in Dice Tower people as the potential dates, make up gaming-related stuff, customized. That would be a blast. I'd love to do this at a convention or something like that.
Hey there, this is Graham from Four Corners of the Board. What game would I want to play with Eric or Tom? Well, this might be a cop-out because what I really want is a rematch with Eric and Merchants of Venus. He taught me this game in Origins last year, and I got completely trounced by everybody that was playing, and I want revenge. So I want to play Merchants of Venus with Eric.
Hey, this is Mike Rudman from Bonus Action, and the game I'd most like to play with Eric is Tales of the Arabian Nights. Actually, Eric doesn't even have to play. I just want to hand him that big, heavy book of tales and enjoy having our own personal storyteller regale us in those soothing, dulcet tones as we experience tales of adventure, intrigue, and the occasional gender transformation. If you've played the game, you'll understand. And maybe we could follow it up with another storytelling game. Maybe Mice and Mystics, or Above and Below, or even One Night Ultimate Werewolf, and we wouldn't even have to use the app. Oh, what the heck, I just want Eric to narrate my life. Is that weird? Yeah, that's weird. Okay. Maybe we can just play Merchant of Venus.
Hey, this is Paul Owen of Dice Tower News. This might sound like pandering, but I'm actually interested in trying out Merchant of Venus and Game of Thrones Iron Throne. with Tom and Eric. Of course, Iron Throne derives from Cosmic Encounter. And I'd really love, I enjoy both those games anyway, but I'd really love to see Tom and Eric in their element and enjoy those games the way they're meant to be enjoyed. So I'm going with Merchant of Venus and Game of Thrones, The Iron Throne.
It's Roy Candy from Epic Gamer Night, and for me, the game I'd most like to play with Tom and Eric is Zaya with the Embers of a Forsaken Star expansion. It's a game that I know both of them like. Eric loves to pick up and deliver, and Tom loves being able to be a pirate in combat, and I think it would be a great game to play 3 players with them. So for me, I'd love to play the space sandbox game Zaya.
Hi, Luke from the Broken Meeple. For me, I like to play games with people I know on Facebook and Twitter that are their favourite games. Now, there are exceptions, my categorically hated games I wouldn't go near. But there's just something about playing someone's favourite game that you just see the spark and the passion that they have for that game, and then the theme and the interaction gets brought out to a whole new level. For Tom, easy. Cosmic Encounter. I love the game, so does Tom. I'd happily play that within a millisecond if it was offered on the table. For Eric, even though the first time I played Merchants of Venus I wasn't blown away by it, I'd give it another try, play it with someone who could teach me the rules maybe better, bring out some more of the theme that the game has, and at the end of the day, you just get to see that passion that that person has for that game, and it's a welcome feeling.
Well, those are some interesting questions. I hope we have a chance to play many of these.
No, I want to talk about these. Okay, first of all, not playing ASL with you, Mark, ever. Okay, not happening. Why did he pick games that you like and a game that he knows I would not play?
I don't. He really wants to force. Many people want to force you to play games, Tom.
I guess. And then, that happens every once in a while, folks. I'll say I don't like a game, and someone's like, the next time we're at a convention, I'm going to play this game with you, and you will like it.
When you play it with me, you'll like it.
But then Sean wants to play Cosmic Encounter with me, yay. And then Spartacus with you. Are you like a
that one,
Spartacus
I don't know
guy?
about that one.
We're not playing Heartthrob, that's for sure.
Oh, that would be fun.
Let me ask you about the Tales of Arabian Nights thing. Would you want to play the game where you had to read everything?
I have played that way, or pretty close to it.
I have played that way too with my kids.
I enjoy reading those. It's fun. It's like narrating a book.
Okay. Well, what's your answer?
I've always said that, like the serious answer is that I would kind of similar to, you got to play this game with me, Tom. You'll like it. I would enjoy playing Antica with you because it's one of my favorites that you haven't played. But I know you played Antica Duellum, the 2-player version, and you weren't really a fan. So
I was not.
That's probably not. The best times that I've had playing games with you have been the raucous ones, and one that probably far and away the most entertaining game I've played with you has been Magical Athlete. And
it's a dumb game too.
Get another shot at that one. There was a Total Con event, and it's a ridiculously dumb game, but I had such fun playing it. I would love to get another shot at that. So if I had a choice, if I could pick anything, I'd want to play Magical Athlete with you again.
All right, I'm going to say maybe Roads and Boats because you could teach me how to play it. Maybe something like that, one of those big splatter games that you like.
Okay.
But I also think the next time we play a game, I want to play like a match where we're both opposing captains in Captain Sonar.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm just every time I get that game out, I'm like, oh, let's do it. Come on.
Yeah.
And when you shoot the enemy sub, you feel such a sense of accomplishment.
Yes.
It wasn't luck. You got your ship to that spot.
Yeah. You've had more practice than I have. I think I'm probably in trouble.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
But that is a good time. That would be fun.
Well, that is the end of our, what do you call this one? Is this the semi-ultimate?
The penultimate?
I forget.
Original format? But we can't even say original format. This is, we've changed so many times over the years. I don't even know where we are anymore.
I do. This is format 4.
Okay.
So, season 4, episode, who knows what. All right. Anyway,
so next week, we're going to do a rundown of the Gamma Trade Show as well as your adventures at PAX East. And then after that, it's our episode 500.
Woo!
Woo!
Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
and you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode, number 498, was recorded on March 8th, 2016. Coming up next week, Tom and I break down our experiences at the Gamma Trade Show and Tom's adventures at PAX East. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. If a catastrophic event has become more than you can handle, find out how we can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom and me, with assistance from Jason Thompson, Itai Perez, Eric Matthews, and Rob Searing. Official walking stick training provided by Our Cane Academy. Timothy Pinkham composed our theme, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games at great prices at CoolStuffInc.com. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network, including Boards and Swords, On Board Games, The Long View, The Party Game Cast featuring The Party Game Cast, Board Games Insider, and Board Game Blitz. Find out more at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. So real quick, spoiler, what was the best thing about Vegas this year, huh?
The food.
Yeah, of course it was the food. I could have answered that for you.